Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Make America Healthy, where our goal is to inspire you, power, and educate you with practical tips so you can take better care of your own physical and mental health. Addiction is something that is running rampant in our society right now. Today's show is called How to Know If You're an Addict, and we're joined by two very impactful guests. We've got Jeff Johnston, who was living the American dream, running a successful financial company in Iowa, and lost his oldest son to fentanyl poisoning when he was 20. Jeff, after that, started a nonprofit and has written a book called This One's for You, his inspirational journey through addiction, death, and meaning. He's doing a podcast called Living Undeterred. He has had some very big challenges in his life. Besides alcoholism, he lost his wife, and he has launched a new mental health app called Brighton, an app geared towards Gen Z. We're also joined by Brett Taylor, who is working as an intake and group specialist at a rehab center called Ripple Ranch and has his own journey with addiction and recovery. And we're really looking forward to not only hearing their stories, but learning how they have overcome some pretty devastating life situations and using resiliency and sobriety, gotten their lives together. So I would like to welcome both Brett and Jeff to Make America Healthy. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Jeff, you and I were chatting a little bit before the show, and you were sharing your story with me. So if you would, for our listeners, please tell us your story and how you got where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, Beth, for this opportunity. And Brett, it's an honor to meet you. I look forward to hearing your story too. Just to fast forward 7 years ago. So it makes me 57 today. Patting myself on the back. Everything is going great. Living life, large, traveling the world, happily married, 3 boys. Seth was 23, Ian 15, Roman 13. And like a lot of people in this country, unfortunately today, there's 830 Americans die every day from the deaths of despair, alcohol overdose, and suicide. So my story isn't unique. It is to me, but a lot of people are going through this every day. I got that call 6:30 in the morning, October 4th, 2016, that our oldest son, Seth, was found poisoned by fentanyl in a hotel room, seedy hotel room, needle in his arm, just like you'd see in the movies. But that wasn't who he was. That's just how he died. And his journey started with Adderall at 16. And so if there's one regret I got to take to my grave is under my watch, I allowed my son to go on Adderall, which now I know in hindsight, I would have at least minimum got a second opinion. But nonetheless, Seth died, and I knew at that point my life was never going to be the same. And you can imagine the conversation telling my wife that our son was dead, but I also had 2 younger sons, 13 and 15, that I had to somehow create this narrative where this is something that was an opportunity for us to become better, not bitter. So in my presentation to the boys, I gave them the metaphor of 2 roads because kids can't really handle a lot of the heavy stuff. So I had to make this kind of a very simple thing. I just said, boys, we have one of 2 roads to go down. We have one road of anger, despair, and hatred, and we'll become alcoholics and addicts ourselves. Or we have a road of inspiration and motivation, and this can be the single greatest moment in our lives to make a difference in the lives of others. I'm on the second road. I ask you to join me. And I really said it that honestly. I've said it so many times now, it sounds rehearsed because it is. But when I really said it at the moment, it was from the heart. And they did. My 2 boys were amazing. And to this moment, they are the reason why I'm probably here. But it didn't work out that way for my wife and I. So for 14 months, we stayed home and I drank every day. I was a 34-year alcoholic. I was also a compulsive gambler for 20 years. So I had my addiction problems and never did drugs. But trust me, gambling and alcohol did enough. I didn't have to do drugs. But I decided on December 24th, 2017, that I was going to quit. And I just looked in the mirror one day. And after 30 something years of drinking, and especially heavy the last 14 months when Seth died, I just stopped. And I don't go to meetings, and I don't really play a lot of the narratives that a lot of people do. And again, Brett knows the story. Everyone's pathway to recovery is unique, and there isn't a right way. Certain systems will claim that they have the right way, but the right way is your way. And if it's God or 12 steps or running, or I know one guy that ran the Sahara Desert, that was his therapy for being sober. And I thought quitting and would be something where it would help my wife, because I noticed my beautiful wife literally dying in front of my eyes. It didn't. And on the day after my youngest son's 18th birthday, which is a pretty important day for somebody, My wife was found dead of alcoholism at the age of 46, but we know it wasn't alcohol, it was grief that killed her. And so death came into my life again as an opportunity to be better, not bitter. And that really is where I draw a line in the sand. And I'm just tired of people dying. I'm tired of people being unhappy. I'm tired of people giving up. And Brett's probably in the exact same boat, two different stories, but him and I both have the same goal. And that's to, as we keep ourselves alive, we can keep others focused on living the best life that they can. So there is a selfish reason that Brett and I do this. And that's obviously because we're of no good to our families if him and I are struggling. We got to take care of ourselves first, and then we can give back. But that's my story in a nutshell. And Brett, I'm excited to hear your story. I'm sure it's compelling. And I have taken so much from other people to put into me. My tank gets really low. And I know yours does too, Brett. And then so does yours probably, Beth, that when you have these conversations and you're vulnerable, there's just something about filling up that tank with love that we can go out in the world and we can try to help people. So again, I'll stop talking, but certainly honored and a pleasure to be here to talk with you too.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you. Brett, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. That was an amazing story. And thanks for having me on, Beth. Well, I grew up into this world. I guess I was born into drugs and alcohol, the way the family was. My father got sober. My mother never really was an alcoholic, she just had mental health issues. Divorce, and that, of course, presents its own problems. But joined the military, went through that, got married, had kids way too young, just making rash decisions because I was running from fear and I was running into drugs my whole life. I started this I was 12 or 13 the first time I tried a drug, and that's the moment that I also knew that was the answer to fixing all of my problems. It was instantaneous. I knew it, but I didn't know I was a drug addict. I would drink because that was easier to get. Everybody in rural America drinks. I grew up Wyoming, Colorado. Everybody's, what do you do for fun? Hunt, fight, and guess the other one. But
Yeah.
that was a life. That's the way everybody was. And the drugs were harder to get. A person applies hard enough. Eventually, you get all what you want wherever you're at.
Mm-hmm.
That was no exception in the military. That just was increased. Way more drinking. I got out. I had all three of my children within my first 3 years of being married, divorced within 3 years of being married. Then I was on my own and I went crazy. I ended up in treatment in 97 in Estes Park, Colorado to get off heroin and meth. I managed to that. I've never touched heroin again since then. I got back into meth a little bit, not much. But the problem is I never really accepted that I had any real illnesses. So I was still drinking. It took me 3 years before I took my first drink. But from that day on, I still remember that exact beer. Like to this day, I know exactly when it was. I know the situation revolving around it. I can see it, the whole thing. I knew right then and there that it was game on again. And that would take me through getting remarried to my wife, losing my kids one more time and my wife again, and getting married again and losing that. I've been to treatment 3 different times, the last 2 times within 2 years. Relapsed 6 hours out of my treatment that I went to in 2020. I just never could figure out that there was different ways of working programs and that I needed to really start honing in on the mental health aspect of things, because in reality, that's where the majority of it lied. It was not my addictions. It was what was leading up to me medicating myself. So in a nutshell, that's it. I've ran the gamut. I've pretty much tried every single drug there is to try. I've lived both sides of the law. I've OD'd, I don't know, a few times, been hospitalized. And a year and 4 months ago, I got sober and I got lucky enough to get a job at a treatment center as a tech. And now I'm back in school to finish up my master's degree to get my licensed social worker so I can start helping people on a different level. And now I just help people where I can here, teaching groups and anger management, self-worth, stuff like that, meditation, just giving them what I've learned.
And so, Brett, being in and out of addiction, which it sounds like you have, do you feel fairly confident that at this point you're going to stay clean and sober for the rest of your life?
I will never, ever in my life say that again. I can't tell you what tomorrow holds. I tell my clients the same thing. I don't know. I'm here today. Tomorrow's a new day. I'm not going to worry about tomorrow right now.
So you're really taking it with a one day at a time approach.
Majority of it, yes. I do have my future plans, my endeavors, my goals, but as far as sobriety, I won't put it as a goal. I won't put it as I'm going to be sober tomorrow. I've tried this too many times and I've failed too many times.
Yeah.
I've relapsed so many times that I guess I'm gun shy at saying that I will be sober for the rest of my life because I don't believe that's possible to say.
So, from everything I understand, the opportunity for someone to get into recovery, and I know for crystal meth, it's something like 6%, and for alcoholism, it's 10%. The odds are in no one's favor. Would you both agree with that statement?
Absolutely.
I
Okay.
would. And Brett, I just want to hug you, man. Your story is so compelling because I agree with everything you said towards the end there, because I used to play that game too. So I don't even call myself sober because that implies that there's a fight going on. I just don't drink today. I don't know about tomorrow, but let's get there first. Let's
Yeah.
get there first. And let me be in a situation where there's alcohol, which I'm not most days, but I have to get there first. And then I have to open the bottle and then I have to put it to my mouth. There's like 50 steps. Maybe there's 500 steps before I actually have that first drink. I can intervene at any one of those stages. So I don't look at it as me versus alcohol. And I think hearing you talk that way, that's like a new look on this whole recovery. That wasn't the way people talked about it not too long ago. Would you agree, Brett?
I think the way people used to talk about alcohol is this is the only way you can do it. You want to quit, and there is no other alternative.
Or if you hadn't drank in 1,000 days and you had it drank once, now you just beat yourself up. And the reality was 99.999% of the last 1,001 days you hadn't drank, but you're spending all your time on the one day you did. And again, that's a cognitive bias that we have. And it's no different with gambling. Gamblers will lose $20 and they'll win 20, but they weight the pain of losing a lot more with the gain of winning. And alcoholics and addicts do the same thing with losses. And I would say, you know what? You're knocking it out of the ballpark, dude. One day out of 1,000, that gets you in the Hall of Fame in every sport.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you both, what is the mindset that I know a lot of people in recovery, and I know a lot of people who have slipped out of their recovery. What is the mindset that, okay, you're an alcoholic, you're in some type of a program. For some reason, you find yourself moving back towards having a glass of wine. But that glass of wine is never one glass, is it? Then for most people, from what I understand, it becomes a downward spiral where you don't stop drinking, you lose your job, you lose your relationship.
I think, Beth, recovery isn't a destination. It's a direction. You don't slip off recovery. It's part of the story. It's part of your recovery journey. And I think that mindset alone is what gets people in trouble when they start telling themselves they slipped off recovery or they fell off the wagon. Those are terms that we have to bury. We have to move on. Your story is your story. It's a process. If you had a drink and in the old days, they called it falling off the wagon, I would just say you had a drink, that you made a decision to have a drink that day. And is that behavior conducive to the life you want to live? And if it isn't, then you learn from that and you try not to do it again. And that's how I think we need to talk to people that are struggling. And I know, Brett, I interrupted you, but I didn't know what your thoughts were on that. Because
I'm just going to add one thing too. I work with a lot of people for weight loss and weight management. And it's very similar to someone will be on a good trajectory and then they'll have a day of bad eating. And then all of a sudden they don't stop. And then it just makes it okay that the next day they continue that behavior that's not really in alignment with their goals of health management and weight loss. And food addiction is something that also runs very prevalent in our society as well. That's why we have an obesity rate of over 50% right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Jeff, I want to speak with you a little bit about your direction towards Gen Z and what's happening there. And we were talking a little bit about the amount of suicide that's happening for people 16 to 21 years old and what's going on there. Who's tracking this? Why is it happening?
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. And I think when you look at just the demographics. Gen Z is the largest generation in human history. They're a third of the world's population. And if we don't, as adults, not just right our ship, but get prepared to right their ship, then everything we're doing today that we leave as an inheritance or a legacy to this generation will be for nothing if we don't get a way to get them righted. How you right that ship? I don't know. I have more questions than I do answers, but I know some of the problems, some of the systemic problems with that generation. One big one is lack of meaning and purpose. They get up in the morning, their feet hit the ground. Why am I going to college? There's no jobs. I'm going to have student debt. Mom and dad fight about Trump and Biden every single day. There's plastics in the ocean. The reefs are being destroyed. There's global warming. You can go on and on. And then they're addicted to their phone. So it's like I was telling you before, and Brett, I'd be happy to punt this to you, but I think right now is the hardest time in human history, especially in America, to be a teenager. And the irony of all ironies to me is they have more abundance and things than any generation's ever had, but they're the most disconnected with everything. They look in the mirror, they don't see anything looking back. And so one big thing we have to do is teach them, show them how to find purpose. And I've got ways in my mind that I like to talk to kids about finding purpose instead of waiting for it to be revealed. There are ways that you can find it. Brett, what are your thoughts on that? I guess I didn't want to steal the thunder there.
No, I think you're going in a very good way, actually. The thing is, I don't see today as really any different than years back. I can go look at my generation, Generation X.
I'm Gen X also.
We didn't look at mental health. It was like, here's your mental health. Go outside and get the hell away from me. We don't want to see you.
I'm the last year of a boomer, so we never talked about this way back then.
Yeah, and it was the same thing when I was growing up. It was like, why do I bother going to college? There's no jobs. Baby boomers got them all. It's the same thing. And now it's the same with Gen Z. There's no job. It's the same thing. I think the big difference today is there's less connection. We're so connected through multimedia. That's the fake connection. Like we say whatever we want, do whatever, no repercussions. But when I'm talking to you face to face, I actually have to communicate. I have to be connected. And that's something that we really lack today. And that purpose that you spoke of, I think this is something that's huge throughout time. Purpose has been something that people really lack on. Like somebody grows up and as a kid, they're like, I'm going to be a doctor. That's my purpose. But is being a doctor the purpose, or is it that I'm going to go help people? Is that my purpose? Career for me is not purpose. That's career.
Yeah.
So I think we need to start talking about what purpose really means and connection with people. And I think there is a possibility to have change in our country. I think we can have change. Example of COVID. We totally quit everything. Like we quit going to work. We quit going to school. We quit everything. Everybody stay at home. But I noticed that people were outside talking more often across their fences. You go to the dog park and people are out there letting their dogs play together and they're talking to each other and it was weird. And then everybody's back to work and we're back to nobody's anywhere and connections lost again.
And we're also back to work in a virtual way, which in my experience, running a school and having a virtual staff now, it is very disconnecting and nothing takes the place of in-person connection, whether you're going to a yoga training online versus in person, or you're having social activities online versus in person. We need our therapy. Yeah, we need the energy and the exposure to other people.
Do you know one? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The one thing that never gets discussed with Gen Z mental wellness, and I did so much study on this before we launched our app, is the number one stressor in older Gen Z, so 18 to 26. What do you think the number one stressor is in older Gen Z?
I'm going to say social media.
Brett, what's your guess?
I'm going to say socializing with each other.
The number one stressor, older Gen Z, 18 to 26, is financial insecurity. I never saw a Zoom, a podcast, a webinar, any curriculum based on a healthy relationship with money. It just so happened to be I did that for 34 years. So when I started thinking of our app, I thought of purpose, I thought of health. Those are already out there. What's the thing missing? And it was a healthy relationship with money. And think of it this way for a second. Money's like the number one reason why people get divorced. It's one of the top two. 70% of American adults are paycheck to paycheck. And 80% can't get their hand on $1,000 in the next 24 hours without borrowing it from a relative or somebody. So where are kids getting their financial relationship with money? TikTok, with YouTubers driving Lamborghinis and flashing $100 bills. They go to school and they learn about the math behind the money, not the emotion. And so one of the things I really think is important, along with health and purpose, is a very good relationship with kids can learn about money. Again, if you just look at the statistics of most American adults, kids are not sitting at home hearing successful investment stories from their mom and dad. They're hearing why they can't pay the bills. And then they go in, and now with gambling on phones, 6% of college students today have a serious gambling problem. 85% of those are men. So that's never talked about. And again, I could go on 20 podcasts or go host 20 podcasts and no one brings that up. To me, it's like the elephant in the room. And it's just so obvious that we can go to 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds and do a lot more than just show them a piggy bank. Talk about credit scores, talk about tax deductions, talk about what compound interest is, all these things that we can do.
Yeah, talk about responsible spending, budgeting. Yeah.
Wants versus needs.
That is actually one of the groups that we offer here. It's a dual diagnosis life skills class. Mm-hmm. So we do talk some on dual diagnosis. What is dual diagnosis? Mm-hmm. Polar and methamphetamine addiction, whatever. Did we discuss that kind of stuff? But we also do discuss life skill things because it's crucially important. It's amazing how many people do not know how to do certain things. The whole financial aspect of it, that is huge. That is one major problem that people in addiction and alcoholism, most of them have an issue with money. Or
they have a criminal record and they can't get a job because of that. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. And so those are just things that we really talk about. How do you move past that? How do you start working with your finances to make a better life for yourself? Because we all have to have money, and and it is a very easy thing to get addicted to spending it, and all of our money goes to drugs and alcohol. We don't become very good managers at it. We just know how to go get the stuff we want. So I think that, that's great that you actually talk about that, because we do discuss that. I just don't think it is enough. That whole life skills aspect in this, because it's not just the alcohol. It's not just the drugs. It's not just the mental health. It's the whole picture. And that goes down to, what were your life skills? Where did you learn how to grow up? And that's a big part of our problem in society today, is is everybody learning to grow up?
Broken families. And
so Jeff, you went into recovery, or you became sober, stopped drinking, but then you had an attempt at suicide. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Christmas, my wife died in June and my mom died in November. She was 89. And this on top of my son. And I have to joke, but my mom died the day after we put our cat down. So I had this, I'm sorry, I can't swear. I had this
You can swear as much as you want on this show.
I had this fucking black cloud over me. And that Christmas, I was just going through boxes of my son and coaching. And ironically today, guys, I told this to Beth, but Brett, today is Seth's 30th birthday, had he been here. And in 2 weeks, it'll be his 7th year anniversary that he died. And that Christmas was so hard. I was by myself and my boys were gone doing things. And I started going through boxes, man. And my son always jokes. He said, Dad, you went from living undeterred to living under a turd. And I did. I went like this, and I went through the next box, and it was wedding pictures and trips to Europe and all the great things of my beautiful wife. And I just went to my closet, and there was 5 more boxes left. I never, even to this day, have opened them. And I went to my closet, opened up my safe, took my bread out, put it on my forehead, took a deep breath and thought, man, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm so sick of living. I just don't want to be here. I know why now in hindsight, why I didn't pull the trigger. But the scary part, guys, was I was at peace of dying. I was okay leaving this earth. And now 2 years later, oh my God, am I so happy I'm alive. I am just so grateful for what I have. And I want to hug everybody.
What stopped you from pulling the trigger that day?
My 2 boys and my granddaughter, Brighton. That's it. If Seth's an only child, my heart goes out to parents that have lost only children. And I can't fathom what they go through. I know moms and dads that have lost their only 2 kids, 1 overdose, 1 suicide. 2 in a car wreck. People can't understand what I've been through. I can't understand how that person stays alive. So to answer your question, Beth, my 2 boys and my granddaughter, I kept seeing their faces and thinking, oh my God, my boys could lose a brother, a mom, and a dad all before the age of 21. Who am I to be the judge and jury for that? I can't do it. And so I didn't do it. Put the gun back. And I'm not going to tell you I've got close to going down that road. I have recently, but I've do meditation. I do about an hour a day. I know Brett mentioned it, and I know you're yoga, and I'd love to learn yoga. It's the one thing I probably don't do. I haven't talked about this much, but I've done some other things that have been part of my therapy that I'm not comfortable publicly talking yet, but I will soon. But to me, that's why I said recovery and all these terms we come up with, these aren't destinations. These are directions. And I could drink today. I certainly wouldn't torture myself, but it's easier not to drink for me.
The topic, this show is called How to Know If You're an Addict. And Jeff, I know you drank for, you said something like 34 years. At what point did you realize if you are indeed an addict, like at what point did it dawn on you? Yes, you are an addict. And then for our listeners who may be questioning some of their behaviors and habits and wondering, am I actually addicted or not? What are some guidelines around that?
I think it's personal, and I'd love to hear Brett's answer on this. I think it's a question problem. I think the way we ask the question, are you an alcoholic? Are you an addict? I think the question should be, are the decisions that you're making interfering with the quality of your life to the point that you can't live the best lived experience that you can? And if you can say, my drinking is interfering with me living the best life I can, then by definition, call yourself whatever you want. But that's my gauge. It wouldn't be, are you an alcoholic? That's like asking a teenager, are you depressed? Most people that are in the grips of these things, they can't self-diagnose very well.
Right.
They're in extreme denial. They're enablers and they're being enabled. It's like, all I have to do is take that question away. Are you an alcoholic? Are you drunk? Are you an addict? And just ask yourself, are the behaviors that you're doing each day interfering with the quality of your life? That's the question we ought to be asking people.
And we have at Yoga Fit, we have a program, Yoga for Addiction. And in that program, one of the tenets is, are the choices that I'm making leading me to greater health and leading me to my goals, or are they taking away from my life goals, my spiritual practice, my relationships, the quality of my life? And then it becomes, I think, an easier answer. Brett, would you like to weigh in on this?
Honestly, what you both said is the truth. Is this affecting the quality of my life? Am I living the life that I want to live? I think one of the things that I like to do is really dig into what are my core values.
Yeah.
What do I want for me? Who do I want to be? Do I possess that core value? And if I don't possess it, then how do I get it? And then I look at my core values, and if I can put drugs and alcohol over core values, then obviously I have an issue with drugs and alcohol because it's affecting my overall well-being. And I'm choosing something over my mental health. So I'm not doing good things for myself.
I just have a question for Brett.
Yeah.
What's your one go-to? Let's say you're in a really bad place. And Beth, I'd love to ask you this too. What's your one go-to? If you like, you're sitting there, all of a sudden, all these thoughts are coming. What's the one thing that keeps you from falling off the ledge there, metaphorically?
I'm going to answer that because I've been at a place of considering ending my life a few times. And one, it's my dog because I don't want to leave him in the care of anybody else on this planet. Two is my career and my profession, which probably wouldn't look that good as the founder of a yoga mind body school if I were to abruptly check out, because then it would mean that what I'm doing is not working. And some of my best coping mechanisms are just to make sure that I exercise every day, that I do some yoga, that I meditate, that I'm watching the foods that I put in my body, because a lot of people don't realize that when we're putting poison foods in our body, putting a lot of sugar, complex carbohydrates that are sprayed with glyphosate, we can't think clearly. Right. And our cognitive function really becomes impaired. Again, when we exercise, when we're doing yoga, taking care of ourselves, that self-care should put us in a better place.
I agree with that. Self-care is very important. I know self-care is the most important thing in my life, but what do I go to when things are going south? I too have struggled with that numerous times. I do a lot of work with pets too, so that's a big issue. One of my hot topics right there. I journal a lot.
Okay. Good.
And I track my behaviors, my moods. That is something that I try and do consistently. And I'm not the best at it. I do screw up and I miss days. But I like to go back and look at my behavior, my mood, because with bipolar, there are days that I will screw up and not take my medication because of the reason I'm pretty good with it. I've gotten a lot better, but it is something that's pretty typical. I have to watch things very closely. And being an addict and alcoholic and having numerous mental health issues, I have to be very self-aware. The journaling helps me do that. But when the words are coming at me, just go get high because that's going to solve the problem. It instantly takes me back to what brought me back to rehab. And that was laying down in a pile of puke, staring at a bag of heroin and meth in front of a toilet, wanting to die. Not wanting, I was dying.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be there anymore. I'm finally happy, and it's taken me 49 years to get happy. I don't want to lose this, so I go to that too. Like it's taken me my life to get to where I am today, so I don't want to go backwards.
Wonderful. Thank you. As we move towards the conclusion of the show, Jeff, tell us a little bit about the app that you've created, who's championing it, and the work that you're doing around the country to promote mental health, especially for Gen Z.
Well, one of the advantages of having attention deficit that unfortunately I didn't get to tell my son because they gave him Adderall. I never had this ability of ever feeling like I'm doing enough. And maybe it's a little imposter syndrome, which I'm okay with it. It's been a great impetus for ideas for me. The app is basically, the concept is it's less of an app and more of a lifestyle. So what we're trying to do is allow kids to self-assess and autonomously build their own personal mental wellness plan, like adults have financial plans. But it's predicated on prevention, not treatment. Treatment isn't working, hasn't worked, labels, diagnosis, that's not what Brighton's about. And Brett, by the way, the name Brighton, when Seth died, his daughter was born 3 weeks later, and her name is Brighton. So every time I see her, she's 6, I get on one knee and I say, Brighton, you brighten my mind, you brighten my life, you brighten my soul. And so it's normal for me to name this project, this initiative, Brighton. And our initiative is to brighten young minds. And that's what we want to do. And so what it is, kids can onboard. It's free to kids at this point. So we're encouraging kids to download it. It's geared towards 14 to 26-year-olds. There's 9 questions. So we build it with CBT and all that fancy crap. But the reality is kids don't care. They just want to sleep good, have healthy relationships, and be positive. They don't care about any of this stuff. They don't need a label. And so we have 9 questions. That's it. 3 in health, 3 in wealth, 3 in purpose. And then we use artificial intelligence to send them opportunities each day that they can start putting into their plan. We have something that I trademarked called a unique life statement. So it's like a mission statement for adults. And so we have a list of words. They pick 3 words. They hit the tone, whether it's standard or funny or whatever, formal. And then ChatGPT actually will create a life statement form. And so what we're trying to do is gamify it a little bit. And we're not trying to addict them to their phones. But if I don't have things in there that pop that dopamine and serotonin like TikTok and Instagram, they're going to lose interest very quickly. We don't want this to be clinical. We want it to be credible and less clinical. That's our little pitch we tell investors. We just launched in 25 days ago. Took me 8 months to build it. I didn't build it. I hired a team to do it because I don't know crap about startups and all that stuff. And we're in I think 9 countries right now. We don't have thousands of downloads. We only have, I think, 300 users,
and spell it for us, Jeff. It's
Brightn.
Okay. So Brighton.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we don't call them users. We call them thrivers.
Oh, nice.
Because users, obviously, that's not a term. So words mean a lot to me. And I personally, when I give my talks, I don't use words like sober and alcoholic and addict and addiction, all those terms. I just, you know what? We're all addicted. Every single one of us is. And when someone says addiction's worse today, it's not. It's just diagnosed more. We were just as addicted 100 years ago, just on different things.
Yeah.
I think, as I was telling Beth before we jumped on, and then I'll stop talking and let you wrap it up, Brett. But in 1990, there was 600,000 prescription stimulants given to kids. So think about that. 1990, 600,000 prescription stimulants. 21 years later, so just 2 decades, it went to 3.7 million.
Wow.
So is the problem the kids, or is the problem us finding labels so we can file insurance claims? You can't just put very sad. You have to put depressed. And you tell me the difference between someone very sad or someone depressed. There isn't any. One, you can get an insurance claim, the other you can't. And I rest my case right there. That's one of my beefs for the rest of my life. I'm trying to destigmatize this. I'm trying to normalize this, not medicalize it. And I think we can do it. All of us can do it if we get passionate enough.
Jeff, you are an incredible inspiration, and thank you so much for sharing
I'm happy
your
I'm still
story.
here.
Thank you. We're really glad you're here, and your story is helping a lot of young people that really need help right now. I have too many friends that have lost children 16 to 21 in the past few years, and it's very sad. Mm-hmm. Jeff, what's your website?
It's brightonapp.com, and then my email is jeff@brightonapp.com.
Wonderful. And we'll have that all in the show notes. Brett, where can we find you? Or maybe you don't want to be found. I
just work out here at Ripple Ranch in San Antonio, Texas.
All right. So if you need recovery and you're near San Antonio, check out Ripple Ranch and you'll get to connect with Brett. He's a great guy. I'd like to thank you both so much for being on Make America Healthy. If you've been listening to this show and you know someone who would benefit from it, please share it with friends and family and loved ones and everyone else. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Life Boost Coffee, the cleanest, most delicious coffee that you'll ever have. It is mold-free, pesticide-free, shade-grown. They pay their farmers an equitable wage. They have lots of great flavors. My favorite is the dark mocha roast. We're coming out with a mindfulness blend with Life Boost coffee that is half calf, so you won't get too jacked up on all the caffeine. And that's powered by YogaFit, one of our other sponsors, YogaFit Training Systems Worldwide, the leader in yoga, mind, body, fitness education, offering seminars, workshops, live events. And if you are looking to learn Yoga for Addiction, our YogaFit Warriors program serves veterans worldwide and first responders and military spouses. We're very involved with the GI Bill and my CAA. So please go to yogafit.com and you can save 10% at checkout by using the code YogaFit3. Also, if you would like to read my book, Healing Trauma with Yoga, or any of my other books, you can find them anywhere books are sold. And please find me on Instagram at Beth Shaw Health. I'd like to thank you both so much for being on this show and sharing such valuable information and really inspiration. And until next time, everyone, let's try to make America healthier. And let's keep a very watchful eye on our young people because they need a lot of help and guidance right now. So namaste, everybody. Thank you so much.